Hi, I'm Malcolm. I'm an astrologer here in Austin. This is part 2 of the houses of the chart of Jimi Hendrix. This is video number 8, and this is going to cover the second half of the chart in terms of the houses. If you want the horoscope, ashtarcommand.net, spiritual blogs, click that on the toolbar, type in astrology, click the magnifying glass, look for me, and where it says free astrology, you can get this chart that I use. Otherwise, the information, November 27th, 1942, 10:15 a.m. Pacific Western Time, Seattle, Washington. And that's for Jimi Hendrix. Okay, so let's get with it. Anyway, as we left off before, we now have we come to the 7th house. The 7th house is also ruled by Mercury. So in terms of his relationships and standoffs with others, he could expect some surprises and changes in news. He would expect either some very, very good news at times, at other times surprisingly bad news. That would be what I would regard Uranus and Mercury with the 7th house. But the thing is, Mercury represents children, if you remember I mentioned once, and he reportedly had 2 surprise children from relationships with groupies. One of them received $1 million from Jimi Hendrix's father. And he was the son of a groupie that he did in Sweden. So maybe that angle. The 8th house, that has Jupiter, the Moon, Pluto, and the North Node in it. So he has a packed 8th house. So with the 8th house, bank accounts, investments, sexuality, death, the occult. I would probably be more to lean towards the sexuality part with Jupiter and the Moon in there because, as I mentioned previously, he had a lot of girlfriends, a lot. And so I think from a sexual aspect, that is what the Moon and Jupiter together in the 8th house represents. Pluto in the 8th house represents crisis and transformation, and it may be a reason why he died. Was because he became the analyst looking into his finances, and they probably killed him for that because he was being cheated out of lots of money. But with Pluto in the 8th house, crisis with one's investments, the basic message, or transformation. He was someone living on the streets fighting roaches off his candy bar to becoming highly respectable in the artistic field, and with some money to prove it, and ownings to prove it. But he did have a crisis with that. So to me, Pluto in the 8th house, in addition to the sexual aspect, he may have been obsessed with sex. He would have crisis in his finances, and I think ultimately that would lead to his death, which can also be symbolized for that. The North Node, I think I talked about that. That's right on top of the star of Regulus. I'm going to talk about that in the next video about stars and so forth. But it does have a strong square with Uranus in the 5th house, which is the house of entertainment. So he undoubtedly will have some connections with areas of the entertainment that are electric and provide surprises, which is pretty much rock and roll. Come to the 9th house, house of travel. He has Neptune there. He has had much in terms of enlightenment of others with his music and his craft. That could be one aspect of it, but also he had many disappointments while on the road. He was never paid at times. He was told not to play the way he wanted to. Little Richard would tell him, back off and so forth. So he had disappointments, but at the same time, with Neptune there and in a trine with Uranus, I would have to say there's no doubt that he was an inspiration and enlightenment to many, many people. And you don't get to be #1 for Rolling Stone's list of guitar players after 42 years for nothing, being dead. So let's go to the 10th house now. That's going to be ruled by Venus. And again, what can you say? The artistic complex. I would say, as far as his aspirations go, it has to do with artistic ambition, without a doubt. And the 11th house, we got Mars there and Mercury there. That's friendships and associates. No doubt he had huge problems with management. I think that's the Mars-Neptune aspect. He had big disputes about his drug use, and also that could mean that his particular associations would probably be drug users. And Mercury, also in the 11th house, he no doubt had associations that were involved in surprising forms of communication like he was. So that could be that aspect. And so his associates and friends, where he got his aspirations from, were probably fellow musicians and druggies. 12th house, he has the Sun and Venus there. The Sun in the 12th house, on a woman's chart, it can mean problem with male figures. On a male's chart, it can indicate problem with the father at an early age, which he did have, but it can also just indicate someone that usually likes to stay in the background of things. They don't like to get into people's faces over a thing, and that was the way he was. He was a very shy, introverted person. And so for the most part, based on experiences maybe from his childhood and his teenage years, he probably had some pretty bad experiences. He had Venus in the 12th house. Venus in the 12th house can take on one of two definitions. It can be that sometime in your life you'll have a divorce, or you could become involved in singing or communication in some ways in artwork. It can also indicate work in museums and working in old buildings that provide entertainment. I think it has a lot to do with the artwork aspect, again, because I mean that was the focus of his life when you read books about him, about how much time he spent practicing his arpeggios and so forth. It was incredible. They think that he shoved about 35 years of guitar playing into about 5 years. That's the estimate with him. Okay, now let's talk about the stars. We got Regulus, right smack on top of the North Node. That's the connection apparatus. Regulus is riches and glory, according to Vivian Robson, but it doesn't last. Then we got the midheaven. That conjuncts the star of Arcturus. And according to Vivian Robson, that is phenomenal success while traveling aboard. Riches and glory while traveling aboard. So even though he might have Neptune in the 9th house, the stars born above him said he was going to score if he went aboard. Then we come to the ascendant. That has the star of Aculus on it, and according to Vivian Robson, that causes blindness, and blindness in one of the eyes, and Hendrix had poor eyesight. He cracked up 5 Corvettes because he refused to wear prescribed glasses because of his vanity and so forth. And that's it. So we're now going to go on next to the zodiac placements of the planets.